Good morning, everyone. This is Mike Lessiter, editor and publisher of Farm Equipment Magazine. Welcome to this history-making first ever webinar from Farm Equipment. Today's event was brought to you and other pre-registrants free, courtesy of HBS Systems. Today's webinar has set a company record for pre-registration, and we are happy to have you join us today. Today's presenter is George Russell, executive partner with Curry Management Consultants. George works with hundreds of dealer principals in farm machinery and other industries and brings a unique mix of experience that also includes many years on the OEM side of the industry. His presentation on the evolution of the farm equipment industry and the drivers of change is a most timely subject in our dynamic industry today. Thanks again for joining us, and we will now turn over the controls to George Russell to begin his webinar presentation. It's all yours, George.
Thanks, Mike, and I'm excited to be a part of this event. This presentation is intended primarily for farm equipment dealers in North America, but I know that there is a diverse audience here, whether it's manufacturers or dealers or people from outside of North America. So though the lessons will be for farm equipment dealers, I think there's a lot of interest because we are, as Mike said, in a very dynamic industry, a lot of changes going on. And I'd like to start with the objective of my view of what I think is driving those changes in our industry so we can understand and begin a dialogue about the whys. And then the experience that we may have had in 38 years in the industry of some lessons for dealership leaders. So my objective today is to really start a dialogue, a conversation, present some facts and some insights from my experience. The way we've constructed this presentation, the themes are really around the importance of people and what that means for the employees, managers, and leaderships in a dealership. Clearly, we're all affected by technology, that advancement of that technology, that increasing productivity, which is at the core, if you will, of the farm equipment industry, which is about using technology to save labor. I mean, going back to Cyrus McCormick and the reaper that allowed one man to do the work of 40 people before. We've just continued that in our industry of labor savings, and how does that relate back to a dealership? And then the changing business things that are driving our business. Though the business is still fundamentally about producing food and fiber, dealerships are now enlarging their scope of their business to go beyond just selling the iron and selling solutions. And so this move from service to services as a business driver will be the themes. The way we'll take the organization of the presentation is, first, let's understand about the structure of the dealer network in North America. Then I'll start at the beginning by saying some of the numbers that you will see will be plus or minus 10%. So they'll be directionally correct, but and they'll paint a picture about an industry that it's in quite a bit of change, and we'll talk about it, the size of dealerships, how that's driven by the changes in what dealers, who they serve, and what type of products they sell. We'll talk about the whys of the changes, and there'll be a variety of things there that we'll talk about in terms of why the changes are occurring, and then the lessons around those three themes of people, technology, and drivers. The first data point is to try to understand just how many dealers there are. And again, the definition of a, quote, farm equipment dealer can vary. So again, this will be plus or minus in terms of the numbers. But you'll see in the red circle the number and estimate of farm equipment dealers, about 7,000 locations, stores, storefronts, rooftops in North America, owned by about 4,600 owners. But of course, as it relates to the definition, there's a lot of overlap, whether it's with outdoor power equipment dealers primarily. Many dealers also sell to homeowners with outdoor power equipment, and there's an overlap with construction equipment dealers. So in the close universe, there are probably about 20,000 locations among all these three circles, about 13,000 owners. And within the red circle of farm equipment dealers, remember, we're not just talking about the big global multinational brands. We're talking about a lot of other brands as well. We're talking about independent dealerships that may not be associated with a quote-unquote major brand. We might even be talking about used equipment dealers, milking machines, grain storage, although we tried to eliminate those. But that definition for our purposes today, let's use that 7,000 number to define the best estimate of mobile farm equipment in a variety of types. And we'll use that 7,000 number to, and you'll see it on the later slides as we go through what are the structure of the industry. So here is by type the various types of dealerships using my definitions, and I'll describe those. So first of all, let's see in the lower left-hand corner the number 7,000 and how this totals to that. At the top, you see the large public companies. You can name them: Titan, Service, Rocky Mountain Equipment. So there's 3 owners. In terms of ag stores, about 40 per owner. Again, it's different sizes. Then there are a variety of large private companies, primarily from the large multinational brands. Many dealers that carry just a single brand, many that carry multiple brands, and that some that carry farm equipment as well as other equipment like construction, like outdoor power equipment, maybe even trucks or other capital goods. That is what many people consider a typical farm equipment dealership, especially with the ones that are growing. You can see the number of stores estimated on the right-hand side per owner. Then there's a classification of dealers that I call emerging consolidators. And in our work with farm equipment dealers, and we in Curry Management work with about 400 dealerships every quarter, we see these types of entrepreneurial businesses that are really exciting to work with because they want to grow their business. They have a place to go, in terms of their business. That entrepreneurial spirit means that they're going to make a difference in their marketplace. They're typically going to grow their own business in a location or add multiple locations, and they're anxious to be working towards the future of the business, and that's why they're fun to work with, and I call them emerging consolidators because they're going to find neighbors to buy and expand with, or merge. Now there'll be a focus here because of the nature of the industry in terms of and where it's going with large dealers, but let's not forget that there are a considerable number of small and viable dealers, about 1,200 of those, mostly single store operations, maybe 2, and in our work looking at the financials with dealerships, they can still make a good business case. They watch their expenses very well. They give close support to the customer. Their biggest question is, what is their succession plan? But they're doing a good business today. And then there are many dealerships that I call small and or struggling. They don't have the scale. They're not running their business with the necessary size or efficient operational metrics to be sustainable in the long run. And there are quite a few of those, unfortunately, in our dealership, in our business. And clearly the question is, what's the future of those dealerships? Now I say small and or struggling because in fact there are some large dealerships that are also struggling, and we see those as well. And then the last line would be, just for completeness, those manufacturers that have chosen to go direct to the customer. And we'll talk about those in terms of direct dealership. I've identified 3 there. So that gives a structure of the industry by the definitions that I've used, and I hope those are understandable and meaningful. Now, a more typical view of the industry, it would be by brand. And again, this foots to 7,000 locations, but because we're talking about brand and there's multi-location or multiple brand dealerships, we had to do some adjustment for the multiple brands. So if you take the 5 quote-unquote major full-line, or not full-line, but multinational brands that are listed at the top, there's probably net that out to about 4,800. Then there's some other new tractor dealerships that sell new tractors, and then some non-tractor brands as well, or stores as well. You can see as you go down, I've listed these, the top 5 brands in order of size in terms of stores per owner. So Deere is clearly leading in terms of the consolidation on an average scale, the 3 stores per owner, working down to Kubota, New Holland, 1.3, 1.4. So that gives us feel of the industry by the major brands, but don't forget there's a lot of other brands and products represented. Now, I mentioned the big dealers, and along with Lessiter Publications, we work to try to understand what is happening with the big dealers in North America. By big, we say, because they're easiest to count, is dealers that have one owner owns or manages 5 or more locations. Now this, of course, may vary by the dollar size, may vary quite a bit, because a single location might be as big as 50 or 60 million dollars, although the average store size in North America, if you look at some NAIDA information, is closer to 10 million. But there are bigger stores in terms of dollar volume. But for our purposes here, we're just defining number of stores as far as quote-unquote a big dealer. As you look at this, you can see that Deere has about 1,500 stores that sell ag equipment. Of the Deere dealers that have 5 or more locations, 103 owners cover 944 ag stores, which means, of doing the math, over 60% of a Deere store that you would walk into would be part of an ownership group that has 5 or more locations. Case IH around 40%, AGCO 20%, New Holland around 15%, Kubota around 10%. At the bottom, taking the 7,000 number again, so the entire industry that we're working with, 1 in every 4 locations would be a store that is part of one of these big dealer ownership groups. So quite a bit of difference by brand, reflects the brand strategies of these 5 major brands. In terms of Deere starting out clearly with others coming along behind, all of these brands are looking at the opportunity to grow their dealer size in terms of ownership groups. Now we took the category here with Lessiter of 5+ stores, and that is clearly increasing, the number of stores with 5 locations. Since we began doing a count of these dealers 5 years ago, you can see there's been a considerable increase in the number of owners and with a number of stores in this group. You note between, as we did this last April, the number actually dropped from 187 to 184. But within that is another phenomenon that's going on. So here we are looking at dealer owner groups that have 15 or more ag stores. So again, over that same period back to 2009, you can see the number of owner groups that have 15 or more stores has gone from 12 to 21. This partly explains why the number of big dealers has gone down, because actually big dealers are buying other big dealers or merging with them. So the total number may be going down, but the big dealers are getting bigger. And if you look, though I don't show that, among the 2 biggest consolidators, Deere and Case IH, I estimate that 1 in every 5 dealers, about 20% of their respective dealer organizations, are part of one of these large 15+ ag stores. So clearly there's a trend towards consolidation at the top end of the dealerships structure. Now the total number of locations is interesting as well. Because it's publicly available from Deere's annual reports, you can get a feel on this chart of the total number of ag locations, which is indicative of the industry as well. So Deere stores that sell ag equipment, that number, about 1,500, has not changed significantly back to 2000. Yes, it's going down slightly, but there's some bigger changes in the turf-only, the construction-only business. So what happens is there's still the same number of locations needed to serve the customer base, but those locations stay, or they might get moved to maybe a better location, but there's still about the same number of total locations, just they're now owned by multiple owners. I mean by single owners. So that gives you a feel for the structure of the network in North America. Again, a focus on large dealers, but remember there's a lot of small dealers, independent dealers as well. What is happening as well is a diversification for farm equipment dealers, getting into other businesses in other regions. So here's some examples. Colorado Equipment, based in Colorado and Wyoming, also the same ownership group, also owns James River Equipment, which has 26 plus locations in the southeast. A lot further away, but have the expertise to operate farm and construction and outdoor power equipment areas in divergent areas. Here's an example with Rocky Mountain Equipment, one of the publicly traded equipment dealers. They operate very strong in Alberta, not a lot in Saskatchewan, very strong in Manitoba. Or Pioneer Equipment has stores in California, Texas, and Idaho. So dealerships that have this expertise to run retail operations are allowed by the manufacturer and encouraged in many cases to go operate in other areas and help take their expertise to grow the business in another region. When we talk about regions, some of these dealerships are also operating outside of North America. So again, we're focusing on the publicly traded dealerships, but they are maybe an indicator of what other dealers can learn from that. So you have RDO operating in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union, also Titan. RDO is a large John Deere, probably the largest in terms of location John Deere dealer that used to be a publicly traded dealership and is now private. Service Equipment, a publicly traded dealer in Canada, operations in New Zealand and Australia. Now what is happening here is it's always instructive in our business as a global business to look at where the best agricultural soil is in the world, because it tells you a lot about what is happening in our business. The world is flat, to use Tom Friedman's term, and we can understand a lot about this globalization by looking about where the most productive agricultural areas are in the world. So the greenest area here are the most productive soils. The second green is the very productive soils. And in the whole world, you look at North America and you see that mass of green productive soil is the largest single area of arable land well served by transportation, whether it be river or rail. And part of the reason for the long-term attractiveness of North American farm machinery is because the productive agricultural soil combined with the technology allows the production of food and fiber. It also means that there's a reason for other manufacturers from other areas to come into North America because it is attractive for that purpose. I drew a line on this map, which is the border between Canada and the US, just to give a scale as you go towards the east of what the climate might be like in another large area of productive soil in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union. which is again why the multinational companies and now dealerships in North America are expanding into that area. And you also see manufacturers from that area, Rostelmosh, coming into North America because of similar climatic conditions and agronomy. In South America, you can see the area of the Pampas in Argentina as a big area. Northern China, again in a temperate zone, the main food producing areas of China. And then of course in Australia, you'll see another big area of green soil. Explains a lot about where the advantages of North America as a producer of food and fiber, but also the reasons why we're getting a lot of competition in North America, and why dealers are moving in that area into those areas of Eastern Europe. So diversification is by region. It's also by product line. So here are some examples of dealers that were in other areas that got into the farm equipment business. Pape Machinery in the Northwest U.S., strong with construction equipment, and most recently has bought into several large John Deere ag equipment dealerships to expand from construction into ag equipment. Moody's, a New Holland dealership in Canada, their owner's been very strong in the truck business and doing an excellent job in the farm equipment business. And then, of course, when you think about construction and ag, there's Caterpillar. Caterpillar themselves took a stab at the ag equipment business, wound up selling that business to AGCO. AGCO is now working strongly with those Cat dealers and now has a mix of Cat dealers and other dealers. The Cat dealers that have remained to sell ag equipment, many of them are expanding very well. An example would be Butler, who's covers the Dakotas and now has expanded in taking over the business in Nebraska. An example of a private dealership are both Lang Diesel in Kansas and Ag Connect in Ontario, who have 8 to 10 locations, private owners who are expanding with AGCO, including the Challenger brand. So again, we're seeing more and more of these dealerships that are successful in other areas diversifying into ag. So that provides some background in terms of structure and changes. Let's try to understand better why these are happening, why these changes are happening. So end users are changing, the society is changing, manufacturers are, and the globalization is occurring. First of all, talking about the tremendous consolidation that is happening among end users, which then cascades into explaining the consolidation at the network level, at the dealer net level. There's the demand for food products. There's the competition that is happening at the local level. There's the need for driving economies of scale. This happens for the farmers. This happens, of course, with dealers as well. And the end result is we see some specialization, more focus on the business, and the end user, the farmer, is getting, as they grow, is getting smarter, more sophisticated, more comfortable with technology. This chart is a bit complicated, but it really tells the story. Back to 1982, the percentage of the ag income in the U.S. that came from million-dollar farms was 23%. That's what this line here starts with. Then the in the agricultural census back to the latest one in 2007, the percentage of farms income, 60% that comes from million-dollar farms, is shown on that chart. So 60% of the agricultural income comes from 2.6% of the farms in the U.S. So and this is all adjusted for inflation. So though the number of farms has gone down from 2.5 million to 2.2 million, the industry is consolidating into a few number of farms. This is true in the U.S. It's also true in Canada. This is the latest agricultural census in Canada that shows farms on the far left are those that sell $10,000 or less. So the dark blue line is the percentage of the farms. Is the percentage of the income. The light blue line is the percentage of the farms. If you look on the right two sets of columns, you see million-dollar farms. 5% of the farms produce 48% of the income. So this consolidation, to put it graphically, let's take the number of farms that represent 60% of all the farm income in North America. That would be, if you took one person per farm, 63,000, that would fit in Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. All the rest of the farm income is done by the 2.5 million farms that are about the population of Houston, Texas. Just a graphic illustration of the concentration of farms in the business. Now, you have to be able as a dealer to serve all of these categories of farms, but it's important to understand the consolidation. Now, the demand in our business that is driving the consolidation is this need for food and fiber. And the industry can look at what has happened from about when I was born in 1953. There were about 3 billion people in the world. Today there's about 7 billion, and along that way there are many people said we were going to run out of food. But the farm equipment industry and farming in general was able to use the technology and productivity to increase that production necessary to feed those people. The projections are that the population of the world will top out around 9 billion. So a considerable need still for even further productions and leverage of technology. Now, as this productive need or need for production drives consolidation, it also drives specialization. This chart shows that back to 1987 in the U.S., if you took the percentage of farms that had livestock, that many farms that may have had cows and pigs and maybe fed cattle has dropped significantly, which means the farms are concentrating on something else, usually crops. So that's a phenomenon that's happening among your users, and that's also changing where the demand occurs in the country. This chart shows from 2000 to 2007, the blue dots are where the number of milk cows increased, the red dots are where they decreased. So you can see there's been some consolidation of where the dairies are in North America or in U.S. to wherever there's some large concentration of blue dots. So whether it's the high plains of Texas, whether it's the Central Valley of California, the Snake River Valley of Idaho, some areas of northwestern Indiana, western New York, some changes that happen. Some dealers will lose demand because of dairies, others will gain. Same thing happening in Canada. This is chart shows the livestock-based farms versus crop-based farms in Canada. 2006, it was about 50-50. The last census, it's more like 60-40, 60 being crop-based farms versus livestock farms. So all those farms in Western Canada that had beef, many of those are just now focusing on crops. So specialization is happening. This chart was just produced last week by the USDA. You may have seen it, that the amount of acreage change of the major crops in the U.S., corn has increased significantly by almost 15 million acres from year 2000, 2002. You can see in the plains in the Midwest the big increase in corn. What has the drop been in? Soybeans in the Midwest, wheat and hay in both of those big areas, and in the South, a big drop in cotton. So a lot of changes going on that dealers need to adapt for because of these changes in the demand. Now, we've been focusing on large farms, but don't forget about small farms, and many people on this call will have an interest in smaller equipment for smaller farms. On the lower left, you can see that in the time period between the two censuses, that actually the number of farms increased by 75,000 of the farm, and that is driven by the farms that are less than 50 acres, which actually increased by 110,000. So that explains the increase, or the number of small farms. And it's no surprise if you look about where those farms are by looking at the blue dots. They're mostly around major metropolitan areas or where people are either having a hobby farm coming out from a city or producing small crops in small areas to produce fresh food and produce to sell to the urban populations. So there's, again, a focus on, don't forget the small farms in these structural changes. Now, one other thing that is important to understand are the dealers' hiring plans for people. This comes again from some work that Lessiter Publications does, shows the demand for people in terms of dealers' intentions to hire. And the biggest numbers on that page are service people, particularly for Case IH and Deere. What that means is there's a competition also for people. Also note the number of people in precision farming areas. So if you have a technical background in service or computer technology, there's a good growth path for you. Within the environment and the society, there are a lot of things that are in dealers' minds about dealing with regulation, whether it's immigration or health care. These have implications in expenses in terms of who they can hire, because the population that will work in a dealership is relatively limited. Also, the manufacturers drive a lot of change because as they change products, especially around emissions regulations. That means the product life cycles are now drive product change and means that there's a change in the type of models, and the keeping up with the number of parts is a concern that dealers have. And then dealers are also have a lot of opportunities for different sourcing products from different manufacturers. And on the screen we've shown some of the acquisitions or consolidations that have happened that mean there will always be a demand for dealers for distributing these types of products and many others. And that explains why there are a lot of other dealers beyond the top 5 that exist to distribute these types of products. Now, what that means is there are some lessons to come out of all these changes. And let's go through those in the time that we have here. First of all, with people. In the past, taking a football analogy, people look for big linemen to be able to push forward at the snap. And we thought that was good. But using this analogy, what happened with one of my teams here in New England where I am, you look at what happened with Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots, who went to 7 Super Bowls, with their first one in 2001, with their no-huddle offense. They adapted their business to be able to handle and work around with the flexibility to be able to actually tire out the other team and those 300-pound linemen, and had a lot of success in the third and fourth quarter because of their adaptability and keeping the other team back on their heels. That worked fine as they adapted, but what happened in Super Bowl 2012? The Ravens put a lot of pressure on Tom Brady and won that Super Bowl. So the Ravens adapted to what the Patriots had done. My point is that business is like football. You've got to have an organization. It's about people. It's about adaptability. It's about change. And that's the first lesson I'd like to talk about. And that is, from a people standpoint, when you look at a dealership, fundamentally it comes down to the people. Now, there are some economies of scale in a dealership, and that drives a lot of the consolidation, but they're not as large as most people think. A well-run operation is a well-run operation, and most of their cost and what they buy from their manufacturer, there's not a lot of other things they can leverage. A farmer can increase his productivity by 2 times by trading in a 300 horsepower tractor and buying a 600 horsepower tractor. A dealer cannot do that kind of fundamental change. It has to work incrementally by leveraging your people. So in the future, finding those people to fit into a no-huddle offense or what the next type of business will be, people that are adaptable, will be your biggest challenge in the future as dealers. And it's not just technicians, but it's other key roles as well. So many cases, a dealership is success is more about the coaching analogy, learning how to coach your people, how to train other levels of organization in your dealership. Another lesson to be learned is about the power of technology. In the past, as we go back 30, 40 years, we were at a victim of distance in the farm equipment business because we were serving, there was no limit to how far a farmer would drive to pick up parts, or where we could go and have our salesmen go out and call on people. And we were relatively distant from the customer. It required a face-to-face visit. With the technology, we're now close. And that means that you're close to your customers, they're close to you. So you can take advantage of that to be networked with your customer. In fact, that is a technology as a multiplier. Just as technology has always, or in farm equipment has always been that multiplier, now as dealers you can leverage that technology, and not just for selling iron, but also for selling services. So the technology is part of this trend of moving from just selling sales and service to selling services, whether it's signal, RTK, agronomics, solutions, even the ability now, which is state of the art, to understand what is happening with the farmer's machines by remote telemetry from your office or from their office. You're understanding that how to adjust a combine. So using that technology and leveraging that continues that trend of what is happening in the business. And it now provides the opportunity for a new driver of the business. In the past, we had what I call an adversarial relationship with our customers. We were trying, as a dealers and as an industry, we wanted the customer to buy our product, and obviously we wanted the highest price, he wanted the lowest price. And so there was this conflict going on that's natural in a buy and sell relationship. And we had a mantra in the business that said, salesman sells the first, serviceman sells the rest. And we had ratios that sell for, as a dealership, you ought to have a 1-to-1 ratio for, if you're doing service on a work order, $1 of labor, which should get you $1 of parts. So those are those types of things that we're dealing with right now in terms of the structure of the business. But going to the future, especially as we get closer to the customers with technology and the collaboration that is needed by adding, in addition to the iron and the service, but adding services, we should look now as sales as collaboration with other suppliers and also with the customer. Because now as dealerships we're selling knowledge and technology, we're selling intangibles. We should be looking to sell recurring services so that the customer is fixed, his machine is fixed before it fails. And especially these larger growers, that's what they look for because they can't afford the downtime in the season. And you as dealerships are selling other things. So from a conceptual standpoint, the farm equipment dealers have a real advantage in this new business model because of your collaboration and information that you have. Collaboration with those that provide the agronomy and understand how the plant grows, the root structure and the leaves, call that the y-axis. But what the farm equipment industry has and farm equipment dealers have is the z and x-axis. You have the machines and the electronic technology to be able to understand the machine in the field, the yield potential, the variable rate applications, and the spraying. You own the x and z axis. So putting those together puts you in a good case to collaborate with those other suppliers and provide a good value-added solution for the customer. Again, there's a lot more that can be elaborated on this, but I hope you get the point about this business model in the future puts the farm equipment dealership in a very good position to see the sales model of the future being collaboration versus adversarial. Another business driver, especially with all these changes in dealers, is understanding how to grow the business. In our experience, the best way for a dealership to grow the business with all the changes that are happening with their customers, that consolidation of the A-level customers, these growing number of small farms, the changes that are happening in the middle, is to use software technology. In this case, it's called customer relations management, a type of system to incorporate into your dealership that allows your entire organization to understand who the farmers are, who the potential customers, and every interaction with them, and be able to take advantage of that software technology so you can have a disciplined approach to sales management. Another thing that is a success for a dealership is understand the expenses of your dealership and also the opportunity from a potential customer. This is a chart that we use that shows out the structure of a dealership: unit sales, parts, service, general and administrative expenses. We're applying this model, financial model, to a customer. In this case, an A-level customer that owns $4.6 million worth of machinery. He should generate parts over a 10-year time horizon of about $325,000. In the past, we've had a ratio of 1-to-1 between parts and service. I want to focus you on the bottom line in terms of each of the departments of the dealership, and understanding that sales is important, but looking at the importance of parts and service. And I'm going to take the bottom line numbers in parts and service if a dealer is managing his business well, to show that a dealership should be able to have a ratio over time of much more in parts and service from a customer than the whole goods. And this is a principle that's been in our business for a long time, but many dealers, because of the good years that we've been having, have forgotten how important the parts and service business is. And this hypothetical best case example, admittedly, just graphically shows that you should be expecting in parts and service twice over the horizon of a machine than what you sell up front. Realizing that the customer is going to trade, going to flip the machines, which is even more reason why you need to keep track of the second and third buyers of those machines, so you're doing the parts and service. These expense targets are very important, and the best performing dealerships manage those expenses well and know the targets that they're shooting for. Also, the expanding dealers, we find, tend to specialize more because they realize there's some economies of scale and some hidden expenses with multiple lines. So, in summary, your people in dealerships need to be adaptable to change because of the change that's going on in the industry, the consolidation of the customers, the competition that is happening. Technology gives you an opportunity to connect better with your customers, and that provides the opportunity to get closer to your customers. And the business drivers, as you move from just selling service to selling services, means you need to collaborate more both with the farmer and with other suppliers, and we need to understand what your expenses are as you grow to have a successful business for the future. We've covered a lot of ground, and I'm sure there's some questions, and some things we went a little too fast and may not have been clear, but I'm looking forward to fielding any questions, and hope we've accomplished the purpose of stimulating some thoughts. Dave?
Okay, now it's time for the Q&A portion of the program. I'm Dave Kaneki, Executive Editor of Farm Equipment and Ag Equipment Intelligence. Our first question is, George, we've seen Deere being the most aggressive in consolidating their dealers. What are you seeing from the other brands? Are you seeing that escalating for any of the others?
Deere started the process, but all of the other full-line multinational brands have some form of initiative to achieve economies of scale at their dealerships, which means consolidation in some form. In some cases, that means trying to find dealers perhaps in other industries that have that ability to run a large organization. That's why you're seeing some construction equipment dealers getting into ag equipment or truck industries. But each of the manufacturers have some kind of program, formal or part of their strategy, to grow the size of their dealers. And it's not just number of locations, but it's also growth within their single locations.
Okay, the next question is, I like the analysis of the 10-year history on customers. Just to clarify, the $4.6 million was a 10-year whole goods purchase amount?
No, that is what a dealer, that's what that customer would have over that, but he would flip that. That's the amount that he would have at one time. He would have that value of equipment. But yes, it would be sold and traded in. But as many customers do, they roll their machines, and they're really looking at, for the 2 or 3 year period of time they own the machine, what they have to pay, and that's figured into that margin.
Okay. The next question, George, our viewer is looking for some clarifications. He says, on your chart with the XYZ axis, I wasn't clear on what the Z axis represents.
It just means that you're dealing in the two-dimensional space, north and east, or whatever those two cardinal directions are. You're dealing with the area. The farm equipment business is covering the field, and that's meant to be the two dimensions of an area, and the vertical axis is meant to signify the plant growing up and down.
Okay, the next question is, do you foresee more publicly traded dealers in the future?
That's a good, excellent question, and part of it's related to tax laws, but also part of it relates to the ability of a dealer to generate their own internal capital. One of the things that we are clearly seeing, because Dave, you like me oftentimes get calls from private equity companies who believe that they can provide capital to help dealers grow. Sometimes going to the public market has been a need, which is why the public companies exist in the business. But there's of capital, private equity firms that can provide that capital if a dealer needs it. But in many cases, we can make the case that a dealer run well with the right expense controls, the right margin, the right economies of scale, the right management and leadership can generate their own capital internally to grow. And we actually talk about that, the operating metrics that a dealer should be looking for to drive business return on sales, which allows them to fund their own growth. So that's a long answer. The short answer is probably not as much as what we saw 7 to 10 years ago.
The dealer consolidation, George, is getting a lot of the attention. This viewer wants to ask, do you foresee continued consolidation of short line manufacturers to deal with the consolidation of their dealer networks?
I see consolidation of short line manufacturers for two purposes. One is because of the vulnerability that short line manufacturers have, where they may have depended on major full line manufacturers for distribution, and certainly that's what is exampled with some cases that actually didn't come in this presentation, but I want to make the point. A company like Krone now has 4 company-owned stores in areas where they were vulnerable to distribution through a major line, and so Krone has chosen to go direct to the customer with company stores. So there is a vulnerability which says, as a short line company, let's band with other short line manufacturers. But the consolidations that have happened so far in short line manufacturers have been driven by another reason, and that is the need to have distribution or take their technology from one region to another. And that's why you're starting to see combinations of short line manufacturers between North America and Europe as examples. And I see that happening a lot more than the distribution side. That doesn't mean it shouldn't happen for the distribution reasons, but right now it's been more driven by the need for a short line manufacturer to grow beyond their home region.
The next question, George, relates to this, and I think you've already answered part of it, but the question is, why is there a lesser concentration of manufacturers starting their own dealerships?
Because history shows that manufacturers have a very, very tough time being successful managing their own stores. And there are a variety of reasons for that, but history just shows that it's very seldom successful. And you can point to several different examples of companies that had company stores and wound up selling them in time.
I think the next question is as much of a comment as it is a question, George. It is frustrating that Deere determines the buyer of the selling dealership rather than allowing the dealer, which obviously hugely discounts any blue sky for the outgoing dealer. What are your thoughts on that?
Any manufacturer has to be very careful about how they manage their dealer organization, given the status of dealer laws and just the threat of litigation. And so, in most cases, and I guess my general point would be, you have to earn as a manufacturer the opportunity for a dealership to expand to another area. The dealer has to earn that opportunity. And yes, there's some reasons where the manufacturer would want to guide the dealership in one area or the other. I mean, that's part about strategy, and the purpose of this consolidation from a manufacturer's side is to have a more effective dealer organization that can gain share and satisfy the customers. So, from a long-term standpoint, they have to try to find, meaning all the manufacturers, have to find that balance between what the entrepreneur wants to do and what they want to do if they're at odds. So, I can't give a specific answer, but to say that there's always this balance between the need of the manufacturer to grow and to do things they want to do, and the need of the entrepreneur who may perceive that his individual needs aren't being met by the manufacturer. One of the things that happens is there are choices in our industry. If you have a good distribution model and have an ability to connect with the end user, there are a lot of options. They may not be the top 5 brands, but there are, as I showed in one of the other charts, there's lots of other options of products to sell if you don't have if you get aren't going where you want to go with your current manufacturer.
Well, there's a lot of interest from our viewers on company stores, and a couple more questions we have is, do you see more manufacturers opening company stores in the future, especially short line companies, and why specifically has company stores failed in the past?
If a manufacturer is looking at company stores, they need to look at some examples where that has happened, and there are one or two in other capital goods industries that may be instructive. Ingersoll Rand, in some cases, has some good company stores. Generac, some of the other clients and industries that we operate in, we look at some examples of company stores doing well. So there are some examples to learn from. The reason why typically they haven't worked in the farm equipment industry has been the cyclical nature of our business, and the fact that used equipment, valuing used, and the flexibility that you need to have at the local level to manage the assets oftentimes doesn't match between with the corporate need to manage assets. So stores have not been successful because the corporate metrics as a manufacturer don't match the mentality that it's needed at a local level to have the flexibility to manage especially used equipment assets. What that means is oftentimes you're not given enough flexibility as a company store to be able to work the assets and the turns that a private dealer would have. And also you may not have the entrepreneurship, you know, the person that is driving the business at a local level that would have that appreciation of how to get the deal done.
Okay, I think we have time for two more questions, George. I'm going to save the more interesting one for last, but this one is very interesting too. Do the manufacturers support the use of outside capital to grow their dealerships?
I do see cases where manufacturers are working with and wanting to be aware of outside firms with capital and may suggest places where a dealer might want to go, realizing that manufacturers also have their own finance organizations that can somehow help in terms of the floor planning and some of the other transition. So yes, there are some examples where that happens. I think I guess return to the point that in many cases a properly run dealership means that he can often generate his own capital as well. I think this is the increasing sophistication of dealerships on their financial side as they're learning how to balance debt and equity better going so they can give a good capital foundation for growth.
Okay, the last question. We have others, and I want to say that we will pass these along to George and let him answer them, and we'll be posting them on the Farm Equipment website. But for today, George, the last question is, as you know, Kubota has made quite a bit of noise about wanting to grow in the ag side. And the question is, how is Kubota going to enter the ag equipment business? And have you heard anything about them buying MacDon?
I haven't heard anything about them buying MacDon, but Kubota has, you know, if you've studied their history in 25 years in North America, very well-run company and execute extremely well. Their purchase of Kverneland, which is a publicly traded company that's very strong in the crop production hay and forage business in Europe, is a pretty significant step, from my opinion, because they put their money to buy a significant player in the business. You may not see that company much in North America, but it just shows you that Kubota is serious about growing their business. They've got some strategic relationships with Land Pride and Vermeer to fill out their product line, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was other relationships or acquisitions to come.
Okay, that's all the time we have today. As I said, the other questions that were submitted, we'll get those to George and get them answered for you and get them on our website. Today's presentation and audio will be made available on the Farm Equipment website in the event you'd like to go back and review it. Watch your email and the Farm Equipment eWatch newsletter for more information. On behalf of George Russell, HBS Systems, and the Farm Equipment staff, thank you for joining us today with our first ever webinar. Please let us know what you think of this webinar and future topics you'd like to see covered in future events. Thanks for checking in.